Hi there, my name's Emma Bridger and I am joined by my colleague Lee Smith. We're co-founders of the EX space. And in this short series, we are looking at demystifying this area of employee experience and engagement. And today I want to talk a little bit about how you do this, where you start, and in particular, think about the EX strategy or blueprint, as we call it. So Lee, I'm going to come to you. Thinking about that, where do we start with developing an EX strategy or blueprint? It's a big question, I
Okay.
know.
It's huge. It's the big one, isn't it? I think, particularly given EX is such a broad discipline, if it's every touch point that an employee has with their organization, where on earth do you begin? And I think there's a number of answers to that. I mean, so for starters, it depends where you're coming from yourself as a practitioner, right? So I'm from my profession, if you like, or first profession is internal comms. I spent 3 decades doing internal comms. So I come from that communication experience perspective, and that leads you down a certain route. So you'd look to focus on the communication experience that people have. What is how do they interact with leaders and line managers? What do they hear and see from those people? What's the kind of communication infrastructure like for the organization? So that leads you down a certain route. I guess the other way, of approaching it is to step right back and say, what's the business or the organization trying to achieve? So begin with strategy. What is the strategic direction of the organization? And take your lead from that, because EX can add value in all sorts of areas. So start with the strategy and build out your blueprint strategy from there. What would you add,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good place to start. We often talk about, thinking about what does the business need? So how can obviously what you're doing help to support the business mission, vision, objectives clearly? If you want to kind of improve your customer experience, how can a great employee experience help you to do that? If you want to innovate, develop new products, how can a great experience help you to do that? So I think starting point for me is really thinking about what's the business trying to do and how can we as EX practitioners support that. And then there's the piece around, what is the work that we need people to do, and also what does a great experience look like for our people. And I think one of the kind of key points to make is not to make assumptions about this, to go out and do some insight work, do some discovery work. And often we get the pushback, there's not enough time. Why are we wasting time asking all these questions? But it will save you huge amount of kind of wasted effort in the long run. So understanding what good looks like for your people. We know that this is hugely overwhelming for a lot of practitioners. Like, it's everything that happens to the employee. Where do we start? So taking time to, for example, use a journey map, get a bunch of employees in a room and say, let's map your journey so far. What was great? What didn't work for you? What needs to be improved? That will help you to prioritize. What are the moments that matter? What are the things that make the biggest difference, have the biggest impact on how you feel about working for us? Now, as practitioners, we might make assumptions about what we think those are and spend a whole lot of time and energy and money on improving a particular experience. And when we actually take time to do the discovery work, we might find that, our people say, what? That doesn't really matter to me. What really matters to me is something completely different. So we have to take time to get those insights so we know we're working on the right things.
Right, yeah. So really you're saying begin with insight and research. Don't kind of leap in, don't make assumptions. We often see, I think you touched on moments that matter there. We often see people approach this with a kind of employee life cycle hat on. And the often the obvious starting place is something like onboarding. But from what you're saying, Emma, that's actually, kind of it resists that urge to dive straight into one particular area, and start by engaging your employees, exploring this, with no real agenda, and get under the skin of actually what will make the biggest difference to them. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually just thinking about onboarding, that's a really good example. So, done a lot of work with companies to help them improve their onboarding experience because it often is quite broken. And the first impression is really important. And people in different areas of the business, the practitioners, the subject matter experts, might be really thinking about things like, how do we implement a great candidate tracking tool, or how do we really develop amazing job descriptions or whatever. And when you get in a room with people who've recently joined the organization, what you hear often is so far from what you thought you needed to do as a practitioner. So they might be saying, you know what, the most important thing for me is that on my first day, I felt loved, that people made an effort, whether I'm working, whether I'm at home or in an office or another place of work, that I felt that people cared. I felt that someone, was interested in who I was and what I was all about. So I think going back to the point, don't make assumptions. And what I would say is, we've got a wonderful course on the EX space called the EX Architect. And that is there as an architect of experience to help you design your blueprint. And it holds your hand through every single stage. It's incredibly in depth. You get some great tools. So if you're struggling thinking, where do I start with designing my strategy or blueprint, as we call it, that gives you everything you need. At the end of the course, you actually get your own really cool tool called a Miro board. And as you go through the course, you actually build your strategy or blueprint. So at the end of it, you've got something, you've got it, you've got at least the bones of it, probably more, to actually take it away. So it is a really fantastic course.
Yeah, back that up 100%. In my old world, Emily, of internal comms, we used to do an awful lot of what we call internal comms audits, where you go into an organization and you kind of do a roots and branch review and assess everything, what's working, what isn't working, what do people want and need. Do you advocate something similar in this area, an EX audit, if you like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done a few of these, haven't we, for clients? And I think starting out with that, how are we doing and how does that compare to how we think we're doing, is a really good place to start. So again, the insights from the audit can be a really good place to then build your strategy or blueprint out from. So yeah, highly recommend doing an audit.
But really underlining that research and insight is really the key to this discipline. Fantastic.